All right. I think we can go ahead and get started. I'm so excited to see y'all here. Thanks for joining us. Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining for our first workshop in our off-bike educational workshop series. And this is our first virtual workshop, which is really exciting. Thank you to our workshop sponsors this year, Trailblazers NWA and the Bethel Lubes Coalition. This series would not be possible without their generous financial support. Please give them a follow on Instagram to see some of the incredible work that these two organizations are doing to support active transportation in Northwest Arkansas. Tonight, we'll learn from our fabulous workshop presenter for about 45 minutes, followed by a 15-minute live Q&A. Please feel free to drop your questions and comments in the YouTube chat, and our team will field questions to our workshop host at the end. If you're not subscribed to our YouTube channel, feel free to do so. We have 3 more virtual workshops this year, and they'll all take place live on this channel. Lastly, before I introduce our workshop host, we will send a feedback form after the workshop. The survey should take you about 5 to 7 minutes to complete, and it will greatly help us improve our programming for the future. So please take a look at that. We will send that in an email following the workshop. Tonight, we're going to be led by Steele. B is an avid gravel rider, mountain biker, and bike packer. They were formerly a bike mechanic in Boston, and now they spread their knowledge to community folks so that more folks can feel empowered to care for their bikes. B and his partner Lauren lead the group Queer Plus Bikes in Fort Collins, Colorado. Queer Plus Bikes is a space that uplifts queer community on and off the bike. B has also been the official mechanic for Grit Fest for the last 2 years and has led workshops at each festival. So we know at All Bikes Welcome firsthand how great they are at giving folks the tools they need to be successful stewards of their equipment. I'm really excited to have you all here. My name is Rachel. I use she and they pronouns. I'm the executive director of All Bikes Welcome. And B, I'm going to let you take it away.
Hey, thank you so much. Whenever y'all are ready, we'll put up that slide deck too. I'm ruining the punchline here. Okay, here we go. New technology. I'm B Steele. You can find me on Instagram at B Steele or my organization or my partner and I's little community group at Queer Plus Bikes. This is going to be kind of new. I've never tried to teach this sort of content virtually. So hopefully this works well, and hopefully things translate to the other side of the screen here. Hopefully if you have questions, or if you have questions we can't even answer here, you can get in touch with me and we can chat more about how to care for your bike and how to use the thing. So we named this off-season, pre-season, and everyday bike maintenance, but that order doesn't really work. So we're going to do everyday pre-season and post-season bike maintenance, just to get you oriented to our order of operations here. So as Rachel said, I used to be a bike tech at REI in Boston, and then I managed repairs at an independent shop in Dorchester, Massachusetts called Ashmont Cycles. I would say that those 2 spaces allowed me to learn a lot about bikes and fall in love with bikes. And now I just volunteer. I work on a sliding scale when folks want to pay me, but mostly I just do it to satisfy my inner tinkerer. And so here we are, you get me. Again, as Rachel mentioned, I am a co-leader of Queer Plus Bikes, a community group where we say, come for the bikes, stay for the community. And I'm also the non-binary and gender expansive leader for the Foco Fonda, which is a gravel event in Fort Collins, Colorado that happens in July. All right, so the first thing that I want to do is just kind of go over some handy tools to have in the pocket or in your garage, or sometimes even with you. We'll go through my bike kit as we get there. So there's a lot of text on the screen. I'm sorry, the animations did not translate. So we'll start on the left-hand side here with things that you should have for any bike that you own. A really high quality floor pump. Maintaining air pressure in your tires is going to be a really great way to save you from flats. It's going to be a great way to make sure that your ride is enjoyable. Cleaning supplies, we'll talk a little bit about that later. This is, everything from rags and dish soap to degreaser to specific tools to clean your bike. Chain lube, we'll talk about this a little bit more in detail as well. A full-size set of hex wrenches. By full size, I mean this, right? So lots of hex wrenches. You can get these beautiful ones in multiple colors. These are from Wera. They're really pretty, kind of gay. And a chain wear indicator, which we'll also talk about a little bit later. Okay, in my ride kit, instead of reading through all of this, I'm actually just going to show you what this looks like. If you guys will switch over the screen focus. All right, so first of all, I want to say that I do carry a little first aid kit with me. You can get these little tiny first aid kits and they fit nicely into like a little, you can actually see up on my bike, the little back pocket situation that I don't know the name of right at this moment. Okay, so this is my handy dandy bike kit. Sticking out of it are some zip ties. This is not on the list, but these are really useful just to carry with you. No matter what type of bike you're riding, you never know when you might need a zip tie or when your friend might need a zip tie. A lot of the things that you carry might not necessarily be for you, might be for your friend. Okay, in this kit, we've got CO2 with a cartridge in it. We've got a tire lever, and this also has a valve core removal tool. We've got chain pliers and spare extra links. We have a chain tool. By the way, I'm very over-prepared. You might not carry all of these things, but if you want to be over-prepared like me, the Boy Scout, you can carry all of these things with you. All right, and then I also have a tubolito, which is just a really teeny tiny tube. Cool. So that's the bulk of it that's in here. However, there's also a handy dandy pocket, and this is where I keep little things that are kind of important too. I have a spoke repair tool. I have an extra derailleur hanger. It's just the pack that keeps on going. I have some tire boots. It's not in here, but it's supposed to be. Valve cores. And then up on kind of in my cockpit area, I bring a spare battery for my electronic shifting, and I bring a plug kit. Right, so these come in a bunch of different styles, but I've got the little plug here. We've also got bacon strips. I apologize in advance that communicating this to you via the camera might be difficult to see. I'm going to try to share things. You will also have access, hopefully, if you will try to figure out a way to share this slideshow with you. And maybe that's, we'll put a link up or something in the comments of the YouTube so you can get this later. Cool. So that's what's in my kit that I carry with me all the time. I have separate kits for pretty much all of my bicycles. So my gravel bike, this is what I bring. For my mountain bike, I have one that's a little bit different. The one thing I didn't note is a frame pump, which is on my bike. And I was not prepared in bringing it down. So I also have a frame pump. Then that's the primary thing that I use instead of CO2. I will only use CO2 if my tire has come unseated. I use tubeless tires, and that's kind of where that all comes into play. Okay, we'll go back to having a big slide. Thank you. All right, the last thing that's down in this corner here, I'm calling specialized equipment. This is either equipment that maybe you don't need all the time, might be handy to have, or it's specialized because it only applies to certain types of bicycles, right? So a shock pump, we'll go over what that looks like and what it does a little bit later, but it's pretty small. It's about the size of your frame pump. Sealant applicators, we'll also look at that in a little bit. Excuse me. A torque wrench. This is one of those things that like is really handy to have, but you don't have to own one. If you own a carbon fiber bike, it's especially important, or a very kind of more in the high-end components. It's nice to have to make sure that you don't over torque your bolts and have a hard time replacing things that maybe strip out. A chain tool. You could also use the one that's in your bike kit. I have a full-size one that I like to use when I'm not on the bike. And then chain pliers. Again, I've got this travel size, but they make full-size chain pliers too, and we'll play with those a little bit later. Okay. All right, so everyday maintenance. We're kind of going to cover 3 different things here. One is a function and safety check, some chain care, and after ride cleaning. These are really imperative things that you can do to keep your bike safe and to also increase the longevity of the components that are on your bicycle. So a function and safety check. You can just go with the ABCs here. We're looking at air, brakes, and your chain, right? Air, you want to make sure that you have air in your tires. You might want to do this the night before your ride if you haven't ridden your bike in a while. What that's going to allow you to know is if you have a slow leak. If you get up to your bicycle and the tire is soft or kind of flat, you can do it just by pressing your thumb into it. You may have a leak. You may have a flat. And you probably want to change your tube or add some sealant to your tire before you take off on your ride. Brakes. When you are when you are at your handlebars, you can squeeze your brakes. You want to make sure that you, as you squeeze them, you get a point where they kind of stop. And it's not because they stop because they hit your handlebars. That's bad news bears. You want to pull them and see if your bike will move back and forth. If it moves back and forth, it's time to go see your mechanic. And then your chain, you just want to make sure that it's moving freely. You might look at it and just see if any of the links are kinked or if there's any debris in there. You also want to lube your chain. We'll talk a little bit about that later, or wipe it down. And you just want to make sure that everything is functioning properly. You may also want to look from the back of your bike. So if your handlebars are here, you're all the way behind your bike. Now your saddle is here, right? You want to look down at your derailleur. That's the thing that moves the chain on your back wheel, and make sure that it's straight. If it's not straight, you might not have a good day on the bike. We can talk about that offline, some ways that you can take care of that. But that's kind of the overall pre-ride check for safety. You want to make sure your brakes work, that you got air in your tires, and that your chain is going to get you somewhere. All right. I mentioned that we're going to talk about how to use a shock pump because that belongs in the air category for you mountain bikers. Make that screen bigger. All right. So this is a shock pump. It looks a fair amount like a frame pump, except this has a thread-on valve. All right. So your shocks, most shocks will have an air chamber in them. This threads into the air chamber, and then you can pump it up using this. You might see on here that our range of values is 0 to 300. On your regular floor pump for your tires, it's probably 0 to 150. And the reason that you have to thread this on and that we have such a high range of values is because the air is very highly compressed within the compartments within your fork or your rear suspension or even your seat post, right? So threading this on creates a safe seal for you to be able to adjust suspension. We do not have time today to talk about setting up suspension on your bike. That is a whole class worth of discussion. But my suggestion to you, if you don't have one of these and you have shocks on your bicycle, you might want to go into a bike shop and ask them, hey, does this have an air chamber? Can you help me find an air shock? That's what you get. And then to find out what you should be at in terms of pressure, you want to go to the manufacturer's website of your fork or your shock or your seat post. And there they will give you a combination of rider weight, which should incorporate you and also anything that you wear. So that might be a hydration vest. That might be your gear bag, right? I usually wear a hip pack when I'm on my mountain bike. You want to make sure you take into account all of those things when you're estimating your rider weight. And it will give you a range of values or an explicit value of where you should have the shock PSI at. So that's that, and that's all we're going to talk about for suspension right now. All right. All right, chain care. All right, the first thing we're going to talk about is the anatomy of a chain. Oh no, my slide with the picture went away. Okay, well, you can go back to that screen split here. So a chain is made up of outer links and inner links, right? So the outer link is on the outside, the inner link is on the inside. Then you have these little things in the middle, which are called bushings or rollers, and there's a pin that goes through them. This is my full-size chain tool, and we're just going to take one of these apart just so you can kind of see the inside of this chain. I'm going to mention this later, but the off-season or when you're bored or albeit injured is a great time to practice with the tools that you own and with some old gear so that you can figure out how to use all of this equipment. The last thing you want to be doing is being stranded on the trail or on the roadside and not be able to fix your bike. All right, so we're going to do this again here. We're starting to explode this piece of chain, right? We've got that pin that's partially out. We've got this outer chain. We've got this inner link, and then we've got the rollers and bushings in here. Let's take one more pin out. It's kind of hard to see, but this pin is pushing through the pin in the chain. So as we turn the chain tool, you'll see the pin coming out. And you'll see that I actually didn't push the pin all the way. That is a little hack. if you don't have a spare master link with you. Or power link is what I think some brands call them. All right, so now we have that outer link that's exploded, right? Something that you never want to see when you're on the trail, with 2 pins in the outer bushings, the outer links. And then we have this inner link and this just falls apart to give you, it's going to be very hard to show you all, 2 outer links that look like this and have a raised bushing, and then 2 of these rollers. And what's happening when your chain wears is you are actually wearing out the inside of this roller. Okay, so this is where chain lubrication comes in. This is also, when I show you how to use a chain tool, what you're measuring is the displacement of this little roller on the bushings on your link itself. Okay. Actually, since we're right here, before we switch, we're also going to look at how to use a chain tool. Okay. There are a myriad of chain tools that you can use. If you have a 12-speed chain, you need specialized equipment, right? So you want to make sure that you get a chain tool that can measure your 12-speed chain. If you have almost anything else, you can get a more simplistic chain tool. This is a chain checker. These 2 items here. They are $11 to $14, and they would be a very, very good investment for you. This is how you can maintain, monitor how worn your chain is, so that you can avoid replacing your expensive cassette and try to just replace your chain over time. I'm going to show you how to use this with this piece of chain here. We're going to pretend that it's on your drivetrain. You'll see this actually has, there we go, 2 wear indicators, 0.5 and 0.75. So this just tells you how displaced that inner roller is, and whether or not you need to replace your chain is kind of more dependent on your manufacturer than explicitly on this tool. But the way that you measure is you hook in one side, and it doesn't matter if you're on an inner link or an outer link, right? And then you go and try to put in the other end. Right now, I'm trying really hard and I can't get it in there, which means that this was a relatively new chain that I took out of a bicycle, and it still has life in it. So I could potentially put this on another bike and we would never notice the difference. The difference between a 0.5 worn chain and a 0.75 worn chain, or depending on your manufacturer, any like 1/10 of wear, you may find that going from a pretty worn chain to a chain that's been worn so much that you need to replace your entire drivetrain does not take that much time. So my suggestion to you is to stay on top of this and measure it maybe once a month, or depending on how often you ride your bike and in what conditions and how well you take care of your chain. This will keep you monitoring your chain wear so that you can avoid costly repairs. Okay, if you'll make the screen slideshow large again. There are a bunch of different kinds of lubes out into the world. We're going to talk about 3. We've got dry lubes, wet lubes, and then something kind of in the middle, but is a little bit more like a dry lube. It's called a wax lube. As the name suggests, dry lubes are better for dry environments. Wet lubes are better for wet environments. There are pros and cons for all of the types of lubes that you can use. In general, brands, as long as you're using a bicycle-specific brand, your lube is going to be just fine. When I worked in Boston, there was someone who would literally put like a cooking grease on their chains. It's kind of ridiculous, but it happens because folks don't know that there's specialized equipment and specialized oils to put onto your chain. It made it to be very messy. It was never a bike that I wanted to work on because my entire clothing would be covered in grease. Those wet lubes will attract more dirt and more grime. The more viscous your lube is, the more likely it's going to attract dirt or sand or muck or grime. As you attract that, those sorts of things, your chain will wear quicker because you're introducing foreign material into these little rollers, right? So you want to try to keep your chain clean and lubricated, because if you lubricate this, it wears more slowly. So there's this balance between cleaning and lubricating. Please don't use WD-40 on your bicycle unless it's the WD-40 bike. Once upon a time, WD-40 did not have a bike's specific type of product. And so lots of folks would use WD-40 on their bicycles. However, that cleans things up, but it does not relubricate your bicycle. So please use bicycle-specific products when you're cleaning and when you're lubing your bike. Okay, in terms of cleaning your chain, you know, a lot of times if you're in a dry environment, I live in Fort Collins, Colorado, you can get away with using a wax lube or a dry lube and not worrying too much about cleaning your chain super often. We don't get a ton of rain here, and we also don't get a lot. It's just dry. So we don't have to worry about it too much. I might wipe down my chain before I lubricate, or if I've just washed my bicycle, I'm going to wipe off my chain to make sure that there's no water on my chain that then is going to rust because it's so dry here. Anytime, we'll talk about this at the after ride care, but you can literally remove your chain from your bicycle to clean it. I don't suggest doing this very often. A lot of these links that we talked about, or that you should carry with you, these are one use only, many of them, especially for like the 11 and 12 speed models. And when I talk about the number of speeds, I mean the number of gears that are in your rear sprocket. That's the one that's on your rear wheel. If a lot of these are only one use, and given that, you might not want to remove your chain all the time to clean it, because these might cost you, $4 every time that you remove this if you can only use it once. The other thing you can do is use a Park Tools style chain cleaner. There's a link in here that shows how to use that, and it's basically a little box that you put on your chain, and then you spin a wheel and it cleans your chain, and you put some degreaser in there, and it gives a very good overall like surface level clean, right? Maybe better than your rag, but not as good as taking your chain off your bike. Those are two things you can use that are pretty easily accessible and relatively cheap. Okay, after ride cleaning. Depending on where you live, Oh, we're missing the best one on here. Sorry. There's an image that's missing. I can grab it actually. After ride clean. I have, yeah, there we go. I have this bucket of Muck Off cleaning products. The one that I use the most is actually the sponge that you can get at a hardware store for like $1. I don't know, maybe with inflation it's $2. But I use this more than any other cleaning product. And it's mostly because I live in such a dry environment. The thing that gets the dirtiest happens to be my bike frame and my wheels. Everything else stays pretty clean. There's also a nice frame brush in here. And then some like wiry, stiff bristled cleaning products, right? And when you're cleaning your bicycle, you want to use either bike specific cleaning products or gentle detergents. So I put 2 examples of that here on the screen. One is Simple Green, which you can get at Home Depot. You just dilute it and you can put it into a spray can. You can make a mix of it in a bucket. I'm not sponsored by Muck Off, so really any cleaning supply will work for you. But you make a little mixture of it. I suggest it with warm water if you can. And then you can do it with either Simple Green or a dish detergent like Dawn, just a couple of drops into your water, and you'll have a great foamy liquid to wash off your bicycle. Cool. And then I'm just going to show you really quickly how to use this, some of these things on your wheels. All right. So we've got this cassette here, and I'm going to show you it. All right. So this is a little there we go, little multi-cleaning thingamajig. And the first thing I might do, if I'm using wet lube or a wax-based lubricant, right, it might be getting stuck in between my cogs. So I'm going to take my wheel out of my frame, and I'm actually going to use this in between the cogs and get anything that's stuck in here out, right? So I might go through on the little cogs. This is a little bit easier, right? You can also do this with a rag. And then if you have like a little brush with pretty hard bristles on it, you can just really rub it on there. And if you put some Simple Green or some Dawn detergent on this, you can just go to town, get that all nice and shiny. Just make sure you rinse off your bicycle after you do that so you don't get soap suds all over your bike. Nobody wants that. You can do this same thing with some of the bristles on your bike. If you have your wheel in your bicycle, flip it over, pedal backwards, or, well, not you pedaling, but you can use your hands to pedal, and just kind of go and clean the chain with this. You can clean your chain rings in the front that's on your crank. Yeah. Okay. Oh, let's use some cleaning tools. Cool, we did that. Thank you. Okay, some other considerations from day to day. If you're an electronic shifting person, you might want to make sure that your firmware is updated. And then also just make sure you change your battery, charge it, and bring one with you. If you have an extra one. It's always nice to have. I've been able to like swap out one on someone else's bike so that they're able to continue their day if they forgot. Again, sometimes bringing equipment on your bike isn't necessarily for you. It's for the folks who are around you. The last thing is topping off your sealant, which you might do throughout the season. And I'm just going to show you really quick how to do this. Okay, so here we go. We've got this valve, right? So we've got our valve stem, we've got our valve core. So using that valve core removal tool from my kit, there are little flats on this. You can see that. There are also flats on my valve core, right? So this goes right onto the valve core. And then this is just the lefty-loosey, righty-tighty. I'm going lefty-loosey here. It's a little bit hard for me to unscrew this. And that's because I think I have some sealant that's gunked up. Wow, I don't know if you guys can see the poofs of sealant going off. You can hear the valve just released. I usually suggest you let the air out of your tire before you go to remove this valve core, right? Otherwise, your valve core might go flying and then you can't find it. And, you know, whether you're at home or not, you might not be able to ride tomorrow if you don't have extra valve cores on you. You can also see on this valve core, oh, maybe you can't see, it's actually a little bit bent up here. This is a very fragile part of your valve stem, of your valve core, and it's very easy to bend, right? Since I'm going to replace this, I'm going to make this look worse than it is, okay? If your valve core looks like this, right, you're probably going to get a slow leak at your valve. This is a really good indicator that you need to replace your valve core. So I'm just throwing that out there. If you come and you're a little cockeyed, right, just replace your valve core. You're seeing it only takes this little $8 tool, and you can get these valve cores. I think if you buy them in a group of 10, I think they're like $15 or so. You can also get them from your local bike shop. I usually get mine online in bulk because it's a little cheaper, and I end up replacing these pretty frequently. All right, so back to that sealant and applicator. Here we've got this little applicator, right? And our little bottle of sealant. If you're a bike packer, I also suggest that maybe you bring a little 4 or 8 ounce bottle of sealant with you. So here, I'm ready to go. All I have to do is push this plastic part onto my valve, which I'm not doing very successfully right now. Right? And then we turn this upside down, and we will put about 2 to 4. So this is absolutely dependent on your tire size. But for this tire, I would be doing 2 or 3 ounces of sealant into this tire, right? And the reason that we might do this without removing your tire, like mid-season, is because sometimes it's hard to get your tire remounted. If you have a floor pump, you can get, there's a bunch of companies that make specific products that you can like inflate a large canister and then be able to put a lot of air into your wheel all at once. If you do that, you again want to make sure that you do that with your valve core out, because that's going to increase airflow into your wheel, right? But that's another story entirely too. We could probably spend a whole hour talking about flats. So in order to put this back in, we're going to pretend that this is a new valve core. You put this on here, right? We've got those flats. We're just going to make this hand tight. You want to make sure that the nut here isn't moving, that your valve isn't moving. You're good to go. All right. Okay, we're gonna try to kind of fly through some of this preseason and post-season maintenance because we've actually covered a fair amount of this. So preseason, you want to be checking your mechanical function. So this is where you're going to use your chain tool and check your chain wear. You can also do this at the end of the season. If you find that you're even close to getting that like minimum wear point, I suggest that you start checking your chain depending on how often you ride, every week to every couple of weeks to a month, right? You might not see a lot of change if you don't ride your bike very frequently, but if you do put a lot of miles on your bicycle or are riding in not awesome conditions, so if it's rainy, muddy, sandy, your chain might wear out more quickly. Cables and housing. You want to look for frayed cables. Usually you'll find this at your derailleur. You want to also look for any housing that has where you can see the inside of the housing. That's not very helpful. The inside of your housing is comprised of a bunch of small wires that either go around in a circle if it's a brake housing, or parallel to the length of your housing if it's derailleur housing. If you can see any metal because that plastic coating has been worn away, you should replace your housing. Tires and sealant. You want to check your tires, make sure that you've got good tread. If you've been riding your bicycle on your trainer and you have a wheel-on trainer, you want to make sure that you don't have a flat spot on your tire, right? That flat spot is where you'll start getting flats, or debris will get in there and will make your day not very fun. I highly suggest, if you do have a wheel-on trainer, get a tire that's pretty dense that you can use just for the winter time on your trainer. Right. Brakes and brake pads. We are actually going to talk a little bit more about that really quickly. Okay, so we have disc brake calipers, right? And then we have something that's closer to a V-brake. If you have any sort of rim brake, the rule will still apply. You want to make sure that your pads still have life in them. For your rim brake, you might have a little line at the top, but if you don't have a line that says a wear indicator, you can actually go by these divots in your brake. If you can't see those divots in the brake pad anymore, it's time to replace your brake pad, right? This particular brake pad, you can keep the shoe and remove the insert, but sometimes you have to replace the entire brake shoe. For a caliper brake, you will have a pair of brake pads and this, which I'm not remembering the name of right now. This spring, there we go, oh my gosh, and a spring. When you're installing your brake pads, whether it's for a rim or for calipers, you want to make sure that you're not touching the surface of your brake pad, right? Anytime you're dealing with brakes, you don't want to introduce contamination to your brake pads or to your rotors or to your rim for that matter. This installation is super easy. I'm just going to pinch, pop it in there. I have new brake pads. You may need to push back. There are pistons within this you need to push back. You can use a tire lever, put it in here and push the piston. If it doesn't go easily, it's time to go see your bike mechanic. We'll talk about rotors, and then we're gonna like absolutely breeze through in 2 minutes to get us through here. If you have brake rotors or a rim, you can take something that's metal, right? And you want to feel along the line where you can see where my brake pad was and where my brake pad was not. If you notice any like shelf here, it's time to replace your rotor. If your wheel has a divot in the rim where your brake pad is, if you can literally feel that it's concave, you need to go talk with your mechanic. You might have a wheel failure. We don't want that. It's very unsafe. Okay. Touch points. We're not going to talk about suspension setup. Touch points. Preseason is a great time to look at your handlebar tape and your grips and make sure that you have good touch points with your bicycle. It's a time to look at your pedals and your cleats and your shoes. If you have pedals, you might need to replace the little pins in them if you're a mountain biker. You might need to replace the cleat on your road shoe or on your gravel shoe. Your pedal might move up and down on its axle. That's not good. No good. So you might need to replace your pedal or have a pedal overhaul. And then you also want to think about things like your saddle or your chamois collection. Maybe you are a road rider and you put in 6,000 miles last year on 2 pairs of chamois. Let's not talk too much about detail in that. Your chamois might be not doing so well, and it might be time to replace them. So just something to think about going into pre-season. For electronic shifting, again, replace the firmware. And the other thing is to replace the battery within your actual shifter that's on your handlebars. That takes a little 2032 battery. That can last up to 2 years. I suggest just take care of it and replace it every year. It will save you a lot of headaches and a lot of sadness when you're out on the trail or out on a ride. Talked about that a little bit. Okay, we talked about that. We're just cruising right through here. Okay, so off-season maintenance, end-of-season maintenance, really most of the mechanical function things that you need to worry about, you probably want to take to a bike shop to address. So that's things like your bearing units, in your wheels, in your pedals, in your bottom bracket, in your headset. Those are all things that need specialized tools that a mechanic can help you with. For folks who are riding dual suspension bicycles, you might want to check your linkages. Those are the bearing units that connect all the moving parts in your frame. For your suspension needs service in order to work properly. Many manufacturers recommend 50-hour, 100-hour, and 200-hour maintenance intervals. Each of them have different kind of advice around those things. Talk to your mechanic about it. A lot of local shops have the capacity to do front suspension, but your rear suspension is something you might have to ship off to a store. So making sure that you have time to deal with it at the end of the season is a great time because not as many people are thinking about getting big maintenance done on their bike. The last thing, when you are in off-season, practice flat fixes and putting in tire plugs if you're in tubeless. Practice chain repair, right? So get out your chain tool and play with a chain. You can play with using old master links and just kind of get a feel for that. And then also practice replacing your derailleur hanger. If you're a mountain biker, a long distance endurance rider, a bike packer, you'll probably, or you or someone in your group, again, may come to a point where they need to replace their derailleur hanger, which is an intentional weak spot on your bicycle because they fell and their derailleur got bent. It's not actually your derailleur that's bent, it's that little piece of metal, right? It's meant to be a weak spot. So practice these things at home so that when you go out into the field, you're able to actually use the knowledge that you have. Sorry for rushing through the end of this. I do want to have some time for some questions. I also just want to send a huge thank you to Paola and to Rachel from All Bikes Welcome for inviting me to come share some knowledge, and to Alicia, who's our ASL interpreter today. Thank you so much for interpreting my ums. Yeah, that's all. Thank you so much, everyone. What should I avoid when cleaning my bikes so that I don't get contaminated disc brakes? So in general, this is a great question. Anytime that you, your disc brakes and your rims, if you have rim brakes, avoid those with sudsy cleaning materials. What you want to use instead is an alcohol cleaner and a fresh rag. So just rubbing alcohol from the grocery store or drugstore. This is not a clean rag, But we're going to pretend it is, right? And so again, because you don't want to touch anything, you're going to put some alcohol onto your rag, and then you can, again, we're pretending this is on a wheel. I'm not touching my rotor right now, right? I'm just going to wipe down that rotor. I might actually put my hand on the wheel itself while I'm doing this so that I'm not touching the rotor. And even if you get something on your rotor or on your brake pads will probably be fine if you rinse them off with water. This is, again, a great reason to rinse your bike after you've cleaned it, right? And it's always good if you've done a cleaning to wipe off your rotors or your rim with alcohol. That's going to remove any of that contamination, or at least most of the contamination. If you find that your rotors are still squeaking, there are products to help alleviate that squeak. But if they've squeaked for a long time, your brake pads might also be contaminated. And sometimes that's from the mineral oil or hydraulic oil that's in your caliper. And there's nothing that you can really do about that except replace the brake pads. So that's always a bummer. But in general, just wipe it down with alcohol and you should be good to go. I was really looking forward to some like spitfire questions here. When we were practicing before this, we were just trying to see what would happen if we put a bunch of questions up onto the screen at once to see if I'd have to be in like fast mode. Okay. Well, is there anything that like maybe folks want me to go over a little bit more? Looks like we've still got a few minutes left. I know I like cruised through a lot of information tonight. It's always hard to plan when you have 45 minutes. There's so much that I want to convey to you all. How much money should one expect to spend per year on bike maintenance? This depends on how much you ride, right? And the like level of equipment that you have on your bicycle. The more expensive your bicycle was to begin with, the more money you're probably going to end up spending on bike maintenance. For most road and gravel bikes, your budget per year is probably a chain and some tires and tubes, right? Those are going to be your expendables. Chain cost is going to depend on how many gears you have in that rear cluster on your rear wheel. Tires depends on whether or not you're tubeless. If you're not tubeless, that cost is going to be a little bit lower. Chains range from $25 to hundreds of dollars. Tires range from $25 for your commuter bike that you don't ride very often to, $85 for really nice tubeless tires, and that's per tire. So yeah, and those Tubelito tubes are, I think they're like $20 a pop. So they're really expensive, but they pack down really tiny, and hopefully you don't ever have to use them. If you have a mountain bike and you ride it pretty often and you have suspension that's serviceable, that front suspension service might run you $75 for like the 50 or 100 hour. The 200-hour service is a full disassembly of your front shock, and so that might be more like 150. The rear shock is pretty expensive to maintain. That one, that requires a lot of specialized equipment and often requires pressurized nitrogen. So only some shops have that, and that might cost you $150 also to send in. So it's a pretty expensive habit that we all have here. Yeah, so that's a great question. And really budgeting for things like chains. I am maybe a little bit of a hoarder, and I will keep an eye out for good deals on things that I use frequently. So whether it's tires or chains, or grips or handlebar tape, I kind of keep an eye out, because those handlebar tape might cost you $40, right? It's a great question. Thank you, Rachel, or whomever asked that question. Are there any tools that are musts to carry, even if I don't know how to use them? A tube. Get the right size tube for your bicycle. That's a 100% must. So that's based on the your wheel size, your tire diameter, and the type of valve you have, right? Always, 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 always bring a tube, because more than likely, if you don't know how to fix it, someone on your ride will. I would also encourage you, if you're doing longer rides, to also get one of those, the power links that we were talking about. Even if you just bring a power link with you, again, maybe you don't know how to use it and you don't have the tools to fix it, but more than likely someone else on your ride will. That's also just a reminder to surround yourself with people who are rad, instead of people who just want to go fast and don't care about leaving you behind. Just giving a plug for Queer Plus Bikes, because we're awesome. Thanks, Jordan. Ah, Brooke, you're the best. Do you have any recommendations for online resources where we can learn to practice handy things such as rehanging our derailleurs? That's a great question. Brooke, you're local and a friend of mine, so you and I can hang out and we can talk about it. But for learning how to do all of these things, Park Tools website actually has a number of really amazing resources. For changing the derailleur hanger, I don't know if they have specific resources for that, but I guarantee if you were to look on YouTube, if you were to put in the make and model of your bike and replace derailleur hanger, you'd probably get a pretty good instructional video. I honestly encourage any of you, all of you, to reach out if you've never done it and you want some tips. I would be happy to do a little video call with you and make sure that you can replace your derailleur hanger. Thanks, Brooke. Cool.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, B. That was incredible. I learned a lot. I was taking diligent notes over here. I invite everybody to join our YouTube channel, subscribe for our future workshops. Feel free to check your email for our feedback form that's coming very shortly. And please send your love to B, and follow Queer Plus Bikes on Instagram. They're doing amazing work, and we're so lucky to know them and have them in our network. Thank you all so much.